The paper cup slipped from his trembling fingers and rolled across the sunlit hospital floor, spilling cold coffee into a thin brown river that stopped just short of a stranger's polished heels. Arman Qureshi barely noticed the mess. His eyes were fixed on the tiny backpack beside him, the one with a broken zipper and a cartoon astronaut stitched clumsily by hand. Inside that bag were his 5-year-old daughter's crayons, her inhaler, and a half-finished note that read, "Daddy, I will be brave today." The words crushed his chest more than the bills folded in his pocket ever could. In that bright daytime corridor filled with the hum of nurses and the distant beeping of monitors, Arman felt the loneliest he had ever been, even though the world moved all around him. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that happen between strangers, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Kindness Touch. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. Arman had never imagined his life would narrow down to moments like this, measured by hospital visits and the careful budgeting of every rupee. 2 years earlier, the morning sun used to greet him through the windshield of his taxi, painting gold over the city as his daughter Zoya hummed in the back seat on their way to preschool. His wife had passed away suddenly from an undetected heart condition, leaving Arman to learn how to braid hair, pack lunches, and comfort nightmares all at once. The days were hard, but the sunlight always seemed to promise that if he kept moving forward, something better waited around the corner. Lately, though, that promise had started to feel like a distant memory. Zoya's recent diagnosis had turned their world upside down. Her breathing had become unpredictable, sometimes tightening like an invisible fist around her tiny lungs. The doctors spoke gently but firmly about treatments, costs, and timelines, and Arman nodded through every word while silently calculating how many extra hours he could drive his taxi before exhaustion caught up with him. He had sold his watch, his late wife's gold earrings, and even the small television they once gathered around for movie nights. Yet the numbers on the bills still rose higher than his courage. That morning, after dropping Zoya off for another round of tests, Arman had stepped into the hospital corridor to gather himself. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, warming the tiled floor and highlighting the dust particles floating lazily in the air. He noticed a woman sitting a few seats away, her posture perfectly straight, yet somehow completely defeated. She wore a simple cream blouse and navy trousers, her hair tied neatly behind her head, but her eyes were red, and her hands were clenched around a phone she wasn't looking at. People walked past her without stopping, as if grief had made her invisible. Arman was not the kind of man who usually approached strangers. Life had taught him to keep his head down and focus on survival. But there was something about the way the woman stared at the sunlight that reminded him of himself, like two people stranded on opposite sides of the same storm. Without overthinking it, he picked up his daughter's backpack and moved to the seat beside her. He did not say anything at first. He simply sat there, letting the quiet companionship fill the space. In a world obsessed with rushing, sometimes the greatest kindness was just staying. Minutes passed, marked only by the distant echo of footsteps and the occasional call of a nurse. Arman eventually spoke, not with rehearsed sympathy, but with the honesty of someone who knew pain intimately. He told her that hospitals had a way of making even the strongest people feel small, that daylight inside these walls often revealed emotions we kept hidden in the dark. He admitted that he did not know her story, but he believed no one should sit alone when their heart was heavy. The woman's shoulders trembled slightly, and for a moment Arman worried he had overstepped. Then she exhaled slowly, as if releasing hours of silent struggle. She explained that she had just received devastating news about someone she loved deeply, someone whose trust she had broken while chasing success. The daylight that usually energized her now felt harsh, exposing regrets she could no longer ignore. Arman listened without interruption, offering no solutions, only understanding. He spoke about Zoya, about learning to cook with burnt pans and mismatched socks, about discovering that strength often arrived disguised as responsibility. The conversation flowed naturally, like two strangers recognizing a shared humanity beyond status or circumstance. The woman thanked him for sitting with her, saying his presence had reminded her that compassion still existed in simple forms. Arman shrugged it off modestly, insisting that sometimes life sent people to each other for reasons beyond logic. A nurse soon called his name, and he rose, wishing her peace before walking toward the pediatric wing. The rest of the day unfolded in a blur of medical discussions and paperwork. When Arman finally stepped outside the hospital, the afternoon sun was bright and unapologetic, children laughing somewhere nearby as vendors called out their offers. He felt drained but strangely lighter, as if sharing his vulnerability with a stranger had lifted a weight he did not know he carried. He returned to his taxi, determined to work a few extra hours before picking up Zoya. 2 days later, Arman received a call from the hospital administration requesting his presence. Panic gripped him immediately. He imagined new complications, higher expenses, more hurdles he was not sure he could overcome. The daylight seemed harsher than usual as he rushed through traffic, his thoughts spiraling into worst-case scenarios. When he arrived, he was escorted not to the billing counter, but to a private office overlooking a small garden. The same woman from the corridor stood near the window, her expression calm yet purposeful. She introduced herself properly this time as Meher Alvi, the CEO of one of the country's largest technology firms. Arman struggled to process the revelation. The woman who had seemed so fragile in the hospital hallway was known across business magazines as a visionary billionaire leader. Meher explained that their brief encounter had stayed with her long after that day. Arman's willingness to sit with a stranger without expecting anything in return had reminded her of values she had lost while climbing the ladder of success. She had inquired about his situation through the hospital staff, learning about Zoya's condition and the financial strain he faced. The realization stirred something profound within her, something that wealth alone had never fulfilled. She informed Arman that she had arranged to cover all of Zoya's medical expenses, not as charity, but as gratitude for the kindness he had shown during one of her darkest moments. She believed that compassion deserved to be honored with action, not just words. Arman felt his knees weaken as relief and disbelief washed over him. The sunlight streaming through the office window seemed softer now, wrapping around him like a promise fulfilled. Life did not transform overnight, but hope began to replace fear in Arman's daily routine. Zoya responded positively to treatment, her laughter returning like music Arman thought he might never hear again. Meher stayed in touch, occasionally visiting the hospital during the daytime, always emphasizing that their connection was built on shared humanity rather than financial disparity. She even started a foundation dedicated to supporting single parents facing medical crises, inspired by Arman's resilience. Months later, Arman found himself sitting in the same hospital corridor, this time watching Zoya chase sunbeams across the floor while holding a balloon shaped like a star. The memory of that first meeting with Meher felt surreal, like a scene from a film he once watched but never expected to live. He realized that the most powerful moments in life often arrived quietly, disguised as ordinary choices to be kind. As the afternoon light bathed the corridor, Arman reflected on how close he had come to ignoring the stranger who had once sat beside him. A single decision to stay present had changed 2 lives in ways neither of them could have predicted. The world still had its hardships, but it also held an incredible capacity for connection, especially during the daytime when clarity replaced shadows. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like, share, and comment below. Your engagement not only supports the channel but also spreads the message that small acts of kindness can create life-changing ripples. There was one final moment that sealed the significance of their journey.